Hi, my name is Haley, and I am doing a audiobook. Andrea, go away. Today I'm going to be reading The Apple Orchard by Susan Wiggs. Part 1. Prologue. Archangel, California. The air smelled of apples, and the orchard hummed with the sound of bees hovering over the bushels of harvested fruit. The trees were in prime condition, waiting for the harvest workers to arrive. The branches had been pruned in readiness for the ladders. The last pesky groundhog had been trapped and carted away. The roads between the trees had been graded smooth so the fruit wouldn't be jostled in transport. The morning was cool, with a mist hanging among the branches. The sun, ripe on the eastern horizon of the rolling hills, offered the promise of warmth later in the day. The pickers would be here soon. Magnus Johansson balanced on the picking ladder, feeling as steady as a man quarter his age. Isabel would scold him if she saw. His granddaughter would call him an old fool for working alone instead of waiting for the pickers to arrive. But Magnus liked the early solitude. He liked having the whole orchard to himself in the muted hush of the warming morning. He was in his 8th decade of life. God only knew how many more harvests he would see. Isabel worried so much about him these days. She tended to hover, like a honeybee in the milkweed that surrounded the orchard. Magnus wished she wouldn't fret. She should know he had already survived the best and worst life had to offer. Truth be told, he worried about Isabel far more than she worried about him. It was the things she didn't know that weighed upon him this morning. He couldn't keep her in the dark forever. The letter on the desk in his study confirmed his worst fear, unless a miracle occurred. All of Bella Vista would soon be lost. Magnus did his best to set aside the troubles for the moment. He had risen early to don his denim boots, knowing today was the day. Over the years, he had learned to judge the moment of maturity for the fruit. Too early, and you had to deal with the inefficiencies of spot picking. Too late, and you risked having fruit that was senescent, breaking down from old age. Some mornings, he felt his own kind of senescence deep in the marrow of his bones. Not today, though. Today, he felt a surge of energy, and his fruit was at the peak of perfection. He'd performed the starch iodine test, of course, but more importantly, he'd bitten into an apple, knowing by its firmness, sweetness, and crunch that the time had come. Over the next few days, the orchard would be as busy as a beehive. He would send his fruit to the market in the waiting boxes, each with a bright Bella Vista Orchards label. A trio cluster of glossy crimson-striped Garvensteins hung several feet out on a branch above his head. Hard-to-reach limbs were usually pruned, but this one was productive. Carefully aware of the extent of his reach, he leaned forward to pick a trio of apples and add them to his basket. These days, most of the workers preferred long bags, which made two-handed picking easier. But Magnus was old school. He was old, period. Yet, even now, the land sustained him. There was something about the rhythm of the seasons, the yearly renewal, that kept him as vigorous as a much younger man. He had much to be thankful for. Much to regret as well. As he captured the apples on the high limb, his ladder wobbled a bit. Chastened, he left the rest of the branch for the gleaners and climbed down. As he moved his picking ladder to another tree, he heard the frantic whir of a bee in distress in the milkweed. A honeybee, greedy for the abundant nectar of the tangled blossoms, was trapped in the flowers, a common occurrence. Magnus often I'm literally streaming live, Rodney. Sorry, that was my brother. Feeling charitable, he liberated a trapped and furiously buzzing bee from the sticky down, releasing a flurry of seeds and parachuted by the feathery umbrellas. With no notion that the sweetness was deadly, the bee immediately dove back into the hedge and returned to sipping nectar, the risk of getting caught obliterated by its hunger. Magnus moved on with a philosophical shrug. When nature drew a creature to sweetness, there could be no stopping it. He moved his ladder to the next tree, positioning it for maximum efficiency, and climbed to a lofty perch. There, his head above the branches, he inhaled the glory of the morning, the redolence of the air, the quality of light filtering through the mist, the contours of the land, and the distant haze of the ocean. A sense of nostalgia swept through him, borne along on a wave of memories. As though it were yesterday, he could see the sun-flooded landscape, with Eva down at the collecting bins, smiling up at him as she supervised the harvest. His war bride, starting a new life in America with him. They had built Bella Vista together. It was a terrible shame that the bank was about to take it away. Despite the success and tragedies, the secrets and lies, Magnus had an abundance of blessings. He had made life with a woman he loved that was more than many poor souls could count. They created a world together, spending their days close to nature, eating crisp apples, fresh homemade bread slathered with honey from their own hives, sharing the bounty with workers and neighbors. Yet those blessings had come at a cost, one that would be reckoned by a power greater than himself. His pocket phone chirped, disturbing the quiet of the morning. Isabel insisted that he carry a phone in his pocket at all times. His was one of the simple ones that sent and received calls, without all the other functions that would only confuse him. The latter teetered again as he reached into the pocket of his plaid shirt. He didn't recognize the number that came up. "This is Magnus," he said, his customary greeting. "It's Annalise." His heart stumbled. Her voice sounded thin, older, but oh so familiar, despite the passage of decades. Beneath the thin, wavery tones, he recognized the sound of a far younger woman, one he had loved in a much different way than he'd loved Eva. His grip tightened on the phone. "How the devil did you get this number?" "I take it you received my letter," she said, lapsing into their native Danish, probably without even realizing it. "I did, and you are absolutely right," he said, though he felt his heart speed up at the admission. "It's time to tell them everything." "Have you done it?" she asked. "Magnus, it's simple enough conversation." "Yes, but Isabel I don't like to upset her." Isabel, beautiful and fragile, so damaged by life at such a young age. "And what about Teresa?" "She's your granddaughter, too." "Would you rather the news come from you, or from some undesignated stranger? We're not getting any younger, you and I. If you don't do something right away, I will." "Fine, then." He felt a flash of hatred for the phone, this little electronic intruder turning a bright day dark. "I will take care of it. I always do. And if by some miracle they forgive us, of course they will. Don't ever stop expecting a miracle, Magnus. You of all people should know better." "Don't call me again," he said, his heart lurching in his chest. "Please don't call me again." He put away his cell phone. The wind swept through the trees, and the powerful scent of apples surrounded him. Wheeling hawks kettled overhead, and one of them loosened a plaintive cry. Magnus reached for one more apple, a lush beauty dangling at arm's length, the shine on its cheek so bright he could see his reflection. The reach unbalanced the ladder. He grabbed at a branch but missed. Then there was nothing to hold on to but misty air. Despite the brutal swiftness of the accident, Magnus felt eerily aware of every second, as though it was happening to someone else. Yet he was not afraid for himself. He was far too old for that. And life had taught him long ago that fear and happiness could not coexist. Part 2. Chapter 1. Tess Delaney's to-do list was stacked invisibly over her head like air traffic over O'Hare. She had clients waiting to hear from her, associates hounding her for reports, and make-or-break meeting with the owner of the firm. She pushed back at the pressing anxiety and focused the task at hand, restoring a treasure to its rightful owner. The current mission brought her to an overfurnished apartment in Alamo Square. Miss Annalise Winter, still spry at 80, ushered her into a cozy place with thready lace curtains, dust-ruffled chairs, and a glorious scent of something baking. Tess wasted no time in presenting the treasure. Miss Winter's hands, freckled by age, their joints knotted with arthritis, shook as she held the antique lavalier. Beneath a pink knitted shawl, her bony shoulders trembled. "This necklace belonged to my mother," she said, her voice breaking over the word. "I haven't seen it since the spring of 1941. She lifted her gaze to Tess, who sat across the scrubbed pine kitchen table from her. There were stories in the woman's eyes, wrinkling like the facets of a jewel. "I have no words to thank you for bringing this to me." "It's my pleasure," said Tess. "Moments like this, they're the best part of my job." The sense of pride and accomplishment helped her ignore the incessant buzz of her phone, signaling yet another incoming message. Annalise Winter was Tess's favorite kind of client. She was unassuming, a woman of modest means, judging by the decrepit condition of her apartment, in one of the city's rambling Victorians that had seen better days. Two cats, whom the woman had introduced as Golden and Prince, lazed in the late afternoon autumn sunshine, spilling through a bumped-out bay window. A homey-looking needlepoint piece hung on the wall, bearing the slogan, "Live this day." Miss Winter took off her glasses, polished them, and put them back on. Glancing at Tess's big business card, she said, "Tess Delaney, Province Specialist, Sheffield Auction House. Well, Miss Delaney, I'm extremely glad you found me, too. You've done well for yourself." Her voice had a subtle tinge of an accent. "I saw that History Channel about the Mark Krakow Museum. You won an award last month in Poland." "You saw that?" Tess asked, startled to know the woman had recognized her. "Indeed I did. You were given a citation for restoring the rosary of Queen Maria Lesinska. It had been stolen by Nazi looters and was missing for decades. It was a moment. Tess had felt so proud that night. The only trouble was, she'd been in a room full of strangers. No one was present to witness her triumph. Her mother had promised to come, but had to cancel at the last minute, so Tess had accepted the accolades from a small camera crew and a cultural minister with sweaty hands. "The very second I saw your face, I knew you would be the one to find my treasure." Miss Winter's words were slightly startling. "And I'm so pleased that it's you. I specifically requested you." "Why?" A pause. Miss Winter's face softened. Perhaps she'd lost her train of thought. Then she said, "Because you're the best, aren't you?" "I try my best," Tess assured her. She thought the conversation odd, but in this business she was accustomed to quirky clients. This piece was with a group of recovered objects from World War I. Tess felt quiet as she thought of the other pieces, jewelry and art collectibles. The majority of objects remained in limbo, their original owners long gone. She tried not to imagine the terrible sense of violation so many families had suffered, with the Nazis invading their home, plundering their treasures, and probably sending many of the family members off to die. Restoring lost treasures seemed a small thing, but the look on Miss Winter's face was its own reward. "You've made a miracle happen," she declared. "I was just telling a friend on the phone that we're never too old to appreciate a true miracle." For a miracle, Tess reflected, the task had entailed a lot of hard work. But the expression on the woman's face made all the research, travel, and red tape worthwhile. At her own expense, Tess had paid an expert to meticulously clean every link, bequet, and facet of the lavalier. "This is a copy of the provenance report." She slid the documents across the table. "It's basically a history of the piece from its creation to the present, as near as I could trace it to its origins in Russia. It's amazing you were able to find this. When I first contracted your therm, I thought—" Her voice trailed off. "How on earth did you do this?" Working backward through the province report, Tess examined the progress of her research, and explained it. "This piece was found with a collection of treasures seized in Copenhagen. The lavalier is pink topaz with gold filigree embellishments. The chain and clasp are original. It was made by a Finnish designer by the name of August Holmström. It was the principal jeweler for the house of Fabergé." Miss Winter's eyebrows lifted. "The Fabergé?" "The very one." Taking out her low pay, Tess pointed out a tiny spot on the piece. "This is Holmström's hallmark, right here. His initials between a double-headed imperial eagle. He designed it specifically to foil counterfeiters. This particular piece was first mentioned in his design catalogue of 1961 and produced for a fashionable shop in St. Petersburg. It was brought by a member of the Danish diplomatic corps. My father. He brought the necklace home from a business trip to Russia, and my mother was seldom without it. Besides her wedding ring, it was her favorite piece of jewelry. He gave it to her to celebrate my birth, though she never said so. I suspect she couldn't have any more children after me." Her eyes had a faraway look, and Tess wondered what she was seeing. Her handsome father, her mother, wearing the jewel against her heart. The stories behind the treasures were always so intriguing, though often bittersweet. The sad ones were particularly hard to bear. There were some cruelties that were simply inconceivable to normal people, some injustices too big to grasp. Miss Winter must have been tiny when her world was ripped apart. How scared she must have been. How confused. I wish I could do more than simply restore this object, said Tess. They wound up with a number of other pieces in a repository in the basement of an abandoned government building. I spent the past year researching the archives. The Gestapo claimed they sent objects for safekeeping. It was a common ploy. The one helpful thing they did was to keep meticulous records of the things they seized. Here was where the things got dicey. How much information does Miss Winter really need? Did she need to know what likely happened to her parents? There were facts Tess had no intention of sharing, such as the evidence that Hildy Winter had been seized without authority by a corrupt officer and probably treated like a slave for months before she was put to death. This was the trouble with uncovering the mysteries of the past. Sometimes you ended up discovering things better left buried. Was it preferable to expose the truth at any cost or protect someone from troubling matters they had no power to change? This piece was taken from your mother after she was arrested on suspicion of hiding spies. Saboteurs from the resistance fighters at the Bispebjerg Hospital. According to the arrest report, she was accused of pretending her patients were extremely ill, and she would tend to them until they conveniently disappeared. Miss Winter caught her breath, then nodded. That sounds like Mama. She was so very brave. She told me she was a hospital volunteer, but I always knew she was doing something important. Behind her spectacles, the old lady's eyes took on a gold glaze of anger. My mother was dragged away on a beautiful spring afternoon while I watched. Tess felt an unbidden shudder of sympathy for the little girl Miss Winter had once been. I'm so sorry. No child should have to witness that. Miss Winter held out the necklace, the facets of the large pink topaz held in the light. Could you put it on me? She asked. Of course. Tess came around behind her and fastened the clasp of the necklace, feeling the old woman's delicate bone structure. Her hair smelled of lavender, and her dress under the pink shawl was threadbare and faded. Tess felt a surge of emotion. This was going to change Miss Winter's life. A single transaction, the old woman could find herself living in the lap of luxury. Miss Winter reached up, cradling the jewel between her palms. She was wearing it that day, even as they were taking her away. She ordered me to run for my life. And that's just what I did. I was very lucky in that moment. Or perhaps there had been a tip-off. A boy who was named Holger Dansk, the Danish resistance, spirited me off to safety. Such a hero he was, like the Scarlet Pimpernel in the French Revolution, only he was quite real. I wouldn't be here today if not for him. None of us would. None of us? Tess wondered who she was referring to. Ghosts from the woman's sad past, probably. She didn't ask, though. She had other appointments on her schedule that couldn't spare time. And knowing the human cost of the tragedy made Tess feel vulnerable. Still, she was taken by the old lady's sweetness and the air of nostalgia that softened her features when she touched and reclaimed the treasure around her neck. We're both all alone, we two, thought Tess. Had Miss Winter always been alone? Will I always be? Well, I'm certainly glad you're here. The old lady's smile was soft and strangely intimate. This is the appraisal on the piece. I think you'll be very pleased. The old lady stared at the document. It says Mother's lavalier is worth $800,000. It's an estimate. Depending on how the bidding goes, it could vary by about 10% up or down. Miss Winter fanned herself. That's a fortune, she said. It's more money than I ever dreamed of having, and not nearly enough to replace your loss. But it's quite a find. I'm really happy for you. Tess felt a glow of accomplishment and pleasure for Miss Winter. In her frayed shawl, surrounded by old things, she didn't look like a wealthy woman, but soon she would be. All the painstaking work of restitution had led to this moment. Tess spread a multi-page contract on the table. Here's the agreement with Sheffield Auction House, my firm. It's standard, but you'll want to go over it with a contracts expert. A timer dinged, and Miss Winter got up from the table. The scones are ready, my favorites. I make them with lavender sugar. It's an old Danish recipe for autumn. You sit right here, dear, and I'll fix the tea. Tess pressed her teeth together and tried not to seem impatient, though she had more appointments and work to do at the office. Honestly, she didn't want a scone, with or without lavender sugar. She didn't want tea. Coffee and a cigarette were more to her taste, and definitely more suited to the pace of her life. She had been running since she rocketed out of grad school 5 years before, and she was in a hurry now. The quicker she bought and signed the agreement to her firm, the quicker she earned her bonus and could move on to the next transaction. However, the nature of her profession often called for forbearance. People became attached to their things, and sometimes letting go took time. Miss Winter had gone to a lot of trouble to make scones. Knowing what she knew about the Winter family, Tess wondered what the woman felt when she reminisced about the old days, fear and privation, or the happier times when her family had been intact. As she bustled around her old-fashioned kitchen, Miss Winter would pause every so often in front of the little framed mirror by the door, gazing at the necklace with a faraway look in her eyes. Tess wondered what she saw there, her pretty, adored mother, an innocent girl who had no idea her entire world was about to be snatched away. "Tell me what you do," Miss Winter urged her, pouring the tea into a pair of china cups. "I would love to hear about your life." "I guess you could say finding treasures is in my blood." Miss Winter gave a soft gasp, as though Tess's statement surprised her. "Really?" "My mother is a museum acquisitions expert. My grandmother had an antique salon in Dublin. So you come from a line of independent women." "Nicely put," thought Tess. Her gaze skated away. She wasn't one to chat up a client for the sake of making a deal, but she genuinely liked Miss Winter, perhaps because the woman seemed truly interested in her. "Neither my mother nor my grandmother was ever married," she explained. "I'll probably carry on that tradition as well. My life is too busy for a serious relationship." "God, Tess, listen to yourself," she thought. "Say it often enough and you'll believe it." "Well, I suspect that's only because the right person hasn't come along yet. Pretty girl like you, with all that gorgeous red hair, I'm surprised some man hasn't swept you off your feet yet." Tess shook her head. "My feet are planted firmly on the ground. I never married either." A wistful expression misted her eyes. "I was in love with a man right after the war, but he married someone else." She paused to admire the stone once again. It must be so exciting, the work of a treasure hunter.
"I'm ready for us to go to bed."
"It takes a lot of research, which most people would find tedious. So many dead ends and disappointments," said Tess. "Most of my time is spent combing archives and old records and catalogs. It can be frustrating, but so worthwhile when I get to make a restitution like this. And every once in a while, I might find myself peeling away a worthless canvas to find a vermeer underneath, or unearthing a fortune under a shepherd's hut in a field somewhere. Sometimes it's a bit macabre. The plunder might be stashed in a casket." Miss Winter shuddered. "That's ghoulish. When people have something to hide, they tend to put it where no one would want to look." The piece wasn't sorted in a dramatic hiding place. It was tagged and neatly catalogued along with dozens of other illegally seized pieces. Miss Winter had arranged the scones just so with a crisp linen napkin in a basket, and brought them to the table. Tess took a warm scone, just to be polite. "It sounds as though you like your work," Miss Winter said. "Very much. It's everything to me." As she said the words aloud, Tess felt a wave of excitement. The business was fast-paced and unpredictable, and each day might bring an adrenaline rush or crushing disappointment. Tess was having a banner year. Her accomplishments were bringing her closer to the things she craved, like air and water, recognition and security. "That sounds just wonderful. I'm sure you'll get exactly what you're looking for." "In this business, I'm not always sure what that is." Tess sneaked in another glance at the clock on the stove. Miss Winter noticed. "You have some time to finish your tea." Tess smiled, liking this woman almost in spite of herself. "All right. Would you like me to leave the contract with you, or—" "That's not necessary," the old lady said, touching her faceted pink topaz. "I won't be selling this." Tess blinked and shook her head a little. "Mom, this is live."
So
It's
time for bed to brush your teeth.
So people can literally be watching it right now. I can't just stop.
Get to the end of that chapter, then you can stop. All right, Bobby, out.
Okay. That sounds just wonderful. I'm certain you'll get exactly what you're looking for. In this business, I'm not always sure what that is. Tess sneaked another glance at the clock on the stove. Miss Winter noticed. "You have time to finish your tea." Tess smiled, liking this woman almost in spite of herself. "All right. Would you like me to leave the contract with you, or—" "That's not necessary," the old lady said, touching the faceted pink topaz. "I won't be selling this." Tess blinked, shook her head a little. "I'm sorry, what?" "My mother's lavalier." She pressed the piece against her bosom. "It's not for sale." Tess's heart plummeted. With this piece, you could have total security for the rest of your life. "Every last shred of security was stripped from me forever by the Nazis," Miss Winter pointed out, "and yet I survived." and you've given me back my mother's favorite thing. As you say, it's a thing, an object you could turn into a comfort and peace of mind for the rest of your days. I'm comfortable and secure now, and if you don't believe memories are worth more than money, then perhaps you've not made the right kind of memories." She regarded Tess with a knowing sympathy. Tess tried not to dwell on all the hours she'd spent combing through records and poring over research in order to make the restitution. If she thought about it too much, she'd probably tear out her hair in frustration. She tended to protect herself from memories, because memories made a person vulnerable. "You must think I'm being a sentimental old fool." Winter nodded. "I am. It's a privilege of old age. I have no debt, no responsibilities, just me and the cats. We like our life exactly as it is." Tess took a sip of the strong tea, nearly wincing at its bitterness. "Oh, the sugar bowl, I forgot," said Miss Winter. "It's in the pantry, dear. Would you mind getting it?" The pantry contained a collection of dusty cans and jars, its walls and shelves cluttered with collectibles, many of them still bearing handwritten garage sale stickers. "It's just to the right there," said Miss Winter, "on the spice shelf." Tess picked up the small-footed bowl. Almost instantly, a tingle of awareness passed through her. One of the first things she'd learned in her profession was to tune into something known as the heft or feel of the piece. Something that was real and authentic, simply had more substance than a fake or knockoff. She set the tarnished bowl on the table and tried to keep a poker face as she studied the object. The sweep of the handles and the effortless swell of the bowl were unmistakable. Even the smoky streaks of age couldn't conceal the face that the piece was sterling, not plate. "Tell me about this sugar bowl," she said, using small tongs to pick up a cube. Sugar tongs. They were even more rare than the bowl. "It's handsome, isn't it?" Miss Winter said, "but the very devil to keep clean. I was not in a terribly practical frame of mind when I picked this up at the church rummage sale long ago. It's been decades. Rummage sales have always been a weakness of mine. I'm afraid I've brought it home any number of bright, pretty things that have happened to catch my eye. Once I get something home, though, it's not as if anyone can guess whether or not I'll actually use it." "This is quite a find," Tess said, holding it up to check the bottom and seeing the unexpected hallmark there. "In what way?" Could she really not know? "Miss Winter, this bowl is a Tiffany, and it appears to be genuine." "Goodness, you don't say?" "There's a style known as the Empire set, very rare, produced in a limited edition. I'd have to do more research, but my sense is this could be extremely valuable. Not that it would matter to the old lady, who preferred her artifacts to cash." "It's a lovely piece regardless," Tess conceded. "What a surprising aspect of your job," Miss Winter said, clasping her hands in delight. "Sometimes you stumble across a treasure when you're not looking for something else entirely." Tess watched the sugar cube dissolve in her cup. "It keeps my job interesting." "Tell me, is this something your firm would sell?" asked Miss Winter. "It's possible, though even with the sugar tongs, a single piece—" "I didn't mean just the bowl. I meant the entire set." Tess dropped her spoon on the table with a clatter. "There's a set?" Okay, that's the end of chapter 1. Sorry for all the interruptions. It's kind of late, and I'm supposed to be going to bed soon. And my brother and sister wouldn't leave me alone, so sorry. And about the mistakes in my reading, I'm not perfect, as nobody is. So, see you for chapter 2.